Greetings, curriculum developers. Dr. Beth here. Wow, we're heading toward the end of our Course B with some fabulous work from all of you, and we're going to do more of the descriptive work this module as we enter into the final phase of our backwards design unit, our UBD unit. The objectives for this module are for you to apply your understanding of differentiation, culturally responsive pedagogy, and how to adjust instruction for student variability to the content makeup of your UBD unit. Complete all the elements of the Understanding by Design backwards design unit for ED 621B, and reflect on the process of building a backwards design unit of instruction with a peer and in a self-reflection, a peer evaluation and self-reflection. So on Tuesday, this Tuesday, you will be doing a peer evaluation with each other, a peer reflection with each other on your UBD unit, and then you will also be completing a self-reflection at the end of the unit. So your tasks are to read, watch, and apply the resources provided for this module. Review and scan Strategies That Work Chapter 7 and peruse this text for ideas for strategies for your unit. Review Understanding by Design Chapter 9. Add notes and ideas in response to the questions on the note-taking guide for the Differentiation UDL section before completing the Differentiation section of your unit. Submit the completed note-taking graphic organizer in the appropriate drop box when you're done using it. Complete this checking for understanding for Module 8. And your last section for Module 8 is to use the notes and ideas from your note-taking graphic organizer and the material from this module, and continue with your unit template to complete your multidisciplinary unit. So you will identify your classroom demographics. You'll review your unit for logical scaffolding and sequencing of learning opportunities and assessments, and of course you'll have already had some feedback on that. Address the cultural, linguistic, and varied learning needs of students through differentiation and content delivery as shown in the example. Submit this assignment in the Dropbox by the due date and time. You can make revisions after the Friday due date without penalty if you've made an initial submission. The final UBD unit is due for summative assessment the following week, next Wednesday, or the Wednesday after Tuesday, today, or whenever you watch this. No late submissions will be accepted. So that's the section, the last section of the unit, Module 8 unit that you that is due. Your final submission, your completed UBD unit with and sans assessment portfolio, just means without the assessment portfolio, is after all your revisions are complete and you're happy with your unit, then you submit your final, your completed UBD unit by the due date into the Dropbox. You will receive feedback on it, but no revisions will be possible. Complete the course reflection posted in the discussion forum, due at the same time as the final unit. So now let's look and see what's in Module 8. Door number 5. Okay, so you'll have a screencast of this here for you to watch before you start Module 8. And here's the PowerPoint for the screencast, because the screencast doesn't come out in beautiful resolution the way we'd all love it to happen. Here's a peer evaluation rubric again, just in case you didn't print it out from Module 7, so it's here for you to print out. There's an infographic about differentiation. There's a tic-tac-toe performance task for Tomlinson, and this is actually a resource for you to use for differentiation. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. I'm just going to open it because I want you to look at it really quick. It's a very nice piece of a very nice support. I'll just make a big of how you can use different levels of thinking to set up, or you can use different levels of just of types, like learning styles, like Gardner's multiple intelligences in these squares, to create lessons that are available to different levels of students in the same content area in your class. And so they get to choose 3 of the possibilities, one from geography, one from important people, and one from contributions, in this case ancient civilizations. And so of the 3 they choose, this is student choice, they get to choose which 3 they're going to use to show you to give you acceptable evidence of their learning. Here's an example for a novel, here's a planet one, Here's a bunch of different possibilities. You can click on these resources. So just so you know that those are there for you as a resource, those are Tomlinson's work. And you can find a variety of them. Be careful because it's really easy to get into the superficial version of tic-tac-toe and think-tac-toe, and you want to avoid that because you want students to still think. You want to stay at that higher order level of thinking or that multiple intelligences. We're looking at since we're looking at differentiation in this module, we're looking at creating equity versus equality. Equality, everybody has the same size box, but not everybody can see. So equity is about access. Equity is everybody needs to have access to the curriculum or the ballgame. And so what does one person need, another person doesn't need, another person needs two, one needs one needs none. So it just depends, and that's what differentiation and access are all about. A nice article, please read it, on how I learned differentiation. 2 videos from Carolyn Tomlinson, really good. You can kind of skip the beginning and the ends of them because they're just processing, but the content of both of these videos is very good and really carries the message. She's sort of the guru of differentiation, but she's not the only one. Differentiation ideas for technology programs. Did I vet this quarter? It should work. Here we go. So lots of different possibilities for differentiation using that. And watch this video, Embedded Support Students with Disabilities, especially it's for everybody. It's not just for special ed people, it's for everybody. You will have students with disabilities of some sort or another. So it's really nice to look how you embed supports for them, just like you embed supports for ELLs. This is a nice video, UDL at a glance. It is a commercial page for somebody who promotes UDL, Universal Design for Learning, but it gives you a nice overview of it so that you understand what the 3 levels of Universal Design for Learning are and how, and make in your own mind your connection with differentiation. It's sort of like 2 sides of one coin. One is about looking at variability and the other is about looking for creating good instruction for all students. Same difference. So wherever your bent is, you can look at, UDL might be more meaningful to you than differentiation. Here's your note-taking graphic organizer that you need to complete on differentiation this time. You're going to, that was your submission. That's the Dropbox. Sorry about that. That's the Dropbox for your note-taking graphic organizer, making sure that you complete it for differentiation before you do what I'm going to show you. Here, so this is your Dropbox for the note-taking graphic organizer. This is your checking for understanding, your Dropbox for your differentiation piece for Module 8, and this is actually the final UBD unit, which isn't Module 8, it's the whole deal. It's ED 621B. This is your final Dropbox for the unit after everything's done and revised. So what is due? What is due for this module? For this module, you're going to take the notes from your note-taking graphic organizer. I'm going to open both of them. Oh no, I'm sorry, I can't open both of them. I'm crazy. And you are going to okay, here we go. Sometimes technology and I don't know what to say to each other. So this is the nutrition unit. I've completed the learning opportunities from last time, standards, learning opportunities, objectives, strategies, and now we're going to a more descriptive place with your unit. At the bottom of your unit, you're going to have a place for differentiation. The first thing you're going to have is a place for learner variability based on content pre-assessment and class demographics, what you know about the students, what you know about what they know about the unit, and who they are. And so I know this about the students from my class. Then I'm going to talk about how I differentiate assessments. and I'm looking at pre-assessment for the nutrition unit. I'm using a checklist, alternate performance task. IEP students will work on basic elements in concert with a special ed teacher, formative assessment, I'll collect data from small, and so forth. So I'm using all these different assessments in my unit, but I'm describing them here in a bullet format because I don't want people just writing and writing and writing and writing. Then after differentiated assessments, instruction leads to assessment, so I'm going to talk about what I do for instruction. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is reading, writing, listening, speaking. When reading the health text, students who have difficulty reading, auditory learners, EL students, so I've taken and GT students, that should be underlined too. All of these students are the way, this is how I've differentiated reading, writing, listening, and speaking for those groups of students in my class. If there are people that have different levels of reading ability, I've accommodated this instructional piece in the class by varying levels of complexity of the nutrition theme main text. The key vocabulary is going to be front-loaded using visuals, and I'll use the Kim sheet to keep track of vocabulary, and I attach that template, as I mentioned to you before. I provide oral language support, especially for ELs. In writing, the ELs will be able to permit to use their native language and use dual language dictionaries. And notice it's dual language dictionaries. This will only be helpful for ELs who can read their own language. And those are the only students that will help. If they can't read their own language, then a dictionary is not going to be helpful. Conferences with the teacher, diagram and draw their understandings, placing captions, and expected that all students will write at their level. For grouping strategies, I use a certain variety of grouping strategies that you'll probably also have written in your right-hand column. Fair and equal participation, how am I supporting that? Cooperative strategies such as think, pair, share, random, systematic calling on of students, and so forth. Equity is also supported by this example. Varying mastery levels of content. Homework is assigned as needed. Alternate assignments are provided. Mini workshops are provided. Different challenge levels to work from. For example, the tic-tac-toe or the think-tac-toe choice chart. Leveled books, and so forth. So varying levels of content. Student behavior needs. Some I'm going to have to accommodate certain students' behaviors. Students with disabilities that have particular disabilities. It's just not anybody. You have to know what the disability is. And I noted that mobility issues do not need to be addressed for this class because everybody can move, walk, use their arms, hands, feet equally well, or mostly equally well. And then learning styles, multiple intelligences, and understanding by design. Understanding by design is so much like Gardner's multiple intelligences that I almost put them together. But I talked about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learning. So you want to see that in your lessons and your learning opportunities. So I made a broad statement here, but it needs to be clearly evident in your learning opportunities. Otherwise, this broad statement isn't going to be acceptable if you don't have these kinds of things available in your actual lesson. The 3 levels of universal design, and this is all true for them: planning, organizing, identifying, categorizing, engaged in motivating, challenging tasks. And that's more or less evident. And then using your note-taking guide again, and this also, you should spend a little time on your note-taking guide pulling some of this out before you write it out. That's why I had you do the note-taking guide from the differentiated pieces from this module. Cultural relevance, access to cultural capital, and language proficiency I've also addressed. And you need to address these 3 things as well based on your notes and the modules we've already looked at in terms of ELLs and cultural relevancy and cultural capital. And that's what your notes are for, is to help you fill this in and be explicit about how you're creating cultural relevance in your lesson, how you're helping students make connections with their own cultural capital and the cultural capital that you're presenting them, and the language proficiency. How are you supporting oral language development, and how are you supporting academic language development for your students? So these are the things you're going to complete, spend time looking at, and giving a very thorough, address them very thoroughly. You want to be very specific about what it is, and I mean specific mostly about what it is you're doing with to support the equitable access to your unit, to the curriculum of your unit. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Now I have probably 10 billion of these up. Okay, so then there's your note-taking graphic organizer. That's the Dropbox again. I'm not going to open it again. So that's what's in Module 8. We're going to open Module 8. Here we go. And I'm going to give you a brief introduction in 2 parts, assessment and opportunities to learn. So I'm going to go through this fairly rapidly. You have time to spend time and look at it on your own. So we're talking about equity again. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And of course, not everybody can, right? Everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So that's why you're doing differentiation. That's why you're doing UDL. That's why you're making accommodations for ELs. Common sense and theory. The idea of differentiating instruction to accommodate the different ways that students learn involves a hefty dose of common sense, as well as a sturdy support in the theory and research of education, which is what you are grounding yourselves in. So what is differentiation? It's an approach to teaching that advocates active planning for student differences in classrooms. We differentiate for basis of biology for boys and girls. We have done it. We don't now. It's not really acceptable to do that, but in some cases there is a belief that that's a good way to do it. Neurological wiring. Actually, there are some good cases for differentiating by gender. Degree of privilege, race, status, economic support, educational experience, positioning for learning, how much support they've had in the past for learning, preferences, learning preferences, and so on. We differentiate for everybody, just like UDL makes learning available to all. How do you explain to student parents why some kids do different work than others? Why is it important? Because your relationships contribute to student energy for learning. So if students know that you care about what you're doing, they will more likely do it than if they didn't think you did. And differentiation, or just accommodating instruction, helps them understand that you care. Builds a context for learning, builds bridges that connect learners and in content, allows for academic growth, student motivation, and efficiency of learning. So what do you differentiate? You do not differentiate standards, you do not differentiate objectives, you do not differentiate goals, and you even don't differentiate levels of thinking. You expect higher level thinking for everybody, but sometimes you change the intermediate goals, the rubrics, depending on what you're assessing, and summative assessment products. You definitely differentiate formative assessments, teaching strategies, learning opportunities, and learning environment. And you can't see the bottom there, but it says time, place, and groupings. You'll see it in the actual PowerPoint. All students must meet all of the objectives. How they meet them is a different question altogether. So we can differentiate how they access, that's the process, whether students have met the objective. We can differentiate learning opportunities and strategies. So you have 3 people getting to the same place in different ways. That's what it's all about. Consider photo albums versus snapshots. So your assessment. What you're looking at are photo albums of work over time. So you can see the difference of George on the bottom versus George on the top. This is a parent night. So this is assessment. Now we're looking at assessment, and you're matching the measures with the goals. So he has gone, he was mirror writing. He now is writing correctly. He's very organized. It's not a global coloring kind of thing. He had an idea. He had already some ideas, and somebody did actually dictate for him. So what are you assessing, and why are you assessing it, and then for whom are the results intended? And so not only is it for George, but it's for his parents to see his growth, right? Form follows function. And then responsive assessment, assess before teaching, that's the pre-teaching, offer appropriate choices, provide feedback early and often, and encourage self-assessment and reflection. This is a very good example of a pre-assessment, of a student assessment that's differentiated. Unit pre-assessment, the student will draw and annotate the life cycle of a salmon. Potential formative assessments, and this student says these are revised as I design products and processes, and all these are the possible things that a student can do to show that they know the life cycle of a salmon. And then a summative assessment, they're going to make an infographic. And then maybe another student's going to form a dramatic representation. And another student will accurately calculate the time passed for the completion of 3 generations of salmon. And the post-assessment, student will produce an infographic using visually. So post-assessment, summative assessments can be the same. Here's a tic-tac-toe for reading response. You're going to differentiate classroom elements. You're going to differentiate patterns of student needs. Here's an example of learning opportunities with choice. This is a very small, these are small children, so they have to go through all of these, but they get to choose when they do them, and they go through that during the day or during the week. Instructional strategies based on, you differentiate instructional strategies. Your guiding questions for managing time, controlling noise, flexible classroom space, organizing and distributing materials and resources, monitoring student work, and making questions, making time for teachers to work. So you want to ask yourself, how are you differentiating for these things? There's so much, right? And engaging learning really picks up a lot of this. You don't have to like detail it like we're detailing it here, really. But this is something that you do want to articulate in your thinking before you make it, again, kind of a global picture. Universal design for learning looks at three ways of, or three levels of learning, three principles. There's the representation. How is it represented? How does a student show and express, how does a student do and express what they've learned? And their engagement, how are they engaged in the learning? So there's recognition learning, strategic learning, and effective learning. So they're involved at all three levels, and all the students are involved at all three levels. Engagement, representation, and action and expression. So this is just a nice outline of what you would expect for each level. I have nothing to say about these extra that you can't read on your own. This might be interesting to you, and there's nothing wrong or difference, and it actually should be direct instruction versus UDL. Direct instruction, differentiated instruction, my apologies. I've been watching too much Anita Archer. A proactive approach that responds to specific student assessment information regarding students' readiness, interests, and learning preferences. Provide a responsive and optimal learning environment to maximize achievement for all learners. Compilation of educational theories, and so forth. It's not so different, it's just language. UDL is a proactive approach that designs flexible goals, methods, materials, and assessments by anticipating the full range of learner needs from the outset. The goal is to eliminate unnecessary barriers to learning in order to increase student achievement. You still have to know your students. You still have to be able to make adjustments based on student variability. So inspired by architecture and product development. They're not really all that different. It's just semantics. And it's all about brain-based learning. They all are about brain-based learning. Responding to the needs of all learners while maintaining high standards and expectations. We're not teaching content, we're teaching human beings. And we're not just teaching human beings, we're teaching individuals. So you do your best to make it available to everybody. And you can't get everybody. So this came out of Tomlinson and McTighe's book, and I really, really liked this. A teacher is something like a jazz musician. The teacher uses many elements and approaches, sometimes planned and sometimes improvisational, to convey the message of a melody. It takes practice to be a good jazz musician, a sense of timing, sensitivity to the meanings of the music, a tolerance for ambiguity and creativity. The jazz musician never loses the melody but expresses it in many ways. That skill set is not unlike that of a teacher in a differentiated classroom whose instruction is both planned and improvisational. For those of you that are very structured people, you will always have to be structured. But in that structure, you have to find flexibility. It's like that Buckminster Fuller tensegrity structure, that big foldable sphere. You have to be flexible. That teacher is always aware of the melody, the curriculum goals, but finds many different ways to the melody. So that's you guys. So your next steps: read, view, and apply the content of Module 8. The videos by Tomlinson and others in the course content section are your primary source material on differentiation. Please watch them. They are very helpful. Add notes and ideas in response to the questions on the note-taking guide in the Differentiation Universal Design for Learning section. Submit completed graphic organizer into the Dropbox that you saw me get into a couple times by accident. Definitely do that before you start writing out your sections in this last part of the unit. Examine and review the assessments and learning opportunities you designed for your unit. Identify and add as needed alternate differentiated assessments and learning opportunities. Please highlight any additions you make in red so that I know you've done them. Otherwise, I can't give you credit for them. Make sure the learning opportunity lessons for your unit are logically sequenced and scaffolded. And then using the notes from your note-taking graphic organizer, you're going to specify and describe your classroom demographics on your unit, just as you saw it. Describe how you address cultural, linguistic, and varied learning needs of students through differentiation, cultural and linguistic responsiveness, and instructional strategies in your UBD unit. Submit the assignments in Blackboard, and I'll give you feedback. Please just make sure you know the expectations for this last module and for your final submission. So this girl, because we're talking about differentiation, about learning styles, says to her principal, or maybe it's her teacher, as we start the new school year, Mr. Smith, I just wanted you to know that I'm an abstract sequential learner and that you'll conduct yourself accordingly. So we really are servants of our students. Hopefully they won't be quite so precocious, but that's really it. You know, we have to kind of find ways to get everybody, and not everybody's always going to get what they need. But we do our best, and that's what you're doing, is your best to make sure to have a picture of differentiation, of equity, of cultural relevance in this unit. So I'm looking forward to seeing your work, and thanks for listening to this screencast before you get started. You have the PowerPoint available to you, and of course it's always nice to just stop when you need to. So with that, I look forward to your final products. Have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you Tuesday for the peer review.